and welcome, no mai haere mai, to the Export Beer Garden studio. This is Champagne Rugby. My name is Tony Lyall, and I will be guiding you through some rugby-based chats for the forthcoming future. And we've got a lovely, lovely guest here, gorgeous man by the name of Manaia Stewart. You know him from the ACC and probably the countdown in the area wherever he lives. Manaia, welcome to Champagne Rugby. How are you, big fella?
Yeah, very good. I think a lot of people will know me from doing sign language interpretation for Jacinda as well through the lockdowns.
That is you.
Yeah.
I wondered about that when I sort of saw you for the first time. I thought, man, he looks a bit small in real life, but his hands are just as gorgeous.
No, I know. And a lot of people thought that I've actually been gone from the ACC for the last 2 years. I've still been on every podcast and commentary, but I've been doing it in sign language, and I've only just clicked that you can't actually hear that if you're just listening to the podcast. So I thought I might bring actual voice back into it.
Yeah, controversial call, the old sign language on the pod. But nice to have
I
you
wanted to
here.
stick with it just for representation, you know what I mean? But so, anyway, I digress.
You've got to do it. You've got to do it. I think before we start, a little overview of the podcast in general. We're going to be having a chat about Super Rugby at the moment because, I mean, it's the only real rugby that's being played that isn't in the Northern Hemisphere, and I just don't have the I guess, the methamphetamine addiction to stay up all night watching those games.
No, I mean, as great as the Six Nations has been, the time zone is just atrocious.
Yeah,
and I think, like you mentioned, none of us can be bothered staying up for it. And actually, Brad Weber was saying that he's been copying all the moves that he's been watching from them over there.
Yeah.
And no one else has seen them because they're not watching them either.
No one had any idea. This is, I think, in direct relation to they've brought back like the little kid style 5 meters out tap, where back in my day, we had a guy, Fetu Aedi. I don't know if he's listening to this. I come from a small town in the South Island, and there was sort of one Tongan family, Fetu and Tino, and they used to absolutely carve up. I think they both went on to play for the Red Devils, Marlborough team there, and they would just destroy us. And if you got a penalty, probably within 20 metres of the line, this is Harlequins Rugby Club, you know, the real dog rugby club, in my humble opinion, of Marlborough anyway. They just sort of tap and go and chuck it to Fetu, and he'd steamroll us all and touchdown every single time. And it's good that they're going back to this idea of the tap and go.
Well, it's so relatable that you brought that up, because in rural South Canterbury we had a very similar phenomenon where Soweli was his name in our grade, and you would hear the calls. This is the only time I've ever seen it in age grade rugby where you would hear the parents of other kids yelling Soweli whenever there was a penalty. Well, one day I was at the bottom of a ruck and I actually got penalised. And I was stuck at the bottom, and I could hear the calls of Soweli before I could even get up to my feet. So by the time I stood up, I was dead in the middle of his tracks. He ran over me, but tripped over and knocked the ball on, thereby saving a certain try. And I won the player of the game, got my little voucher, my Happy Meal voucher.
Oh, how good. The old cheeseburger voucher. I think they still do those, actually. In little kid rugby player of the day does still get a cheeseburger, which is good to know that, like, they're not worried about diets or anything in this modern world. They're still like, go eat a cheeseburger, get stuck in.
Well, and heartbreaking for Mum as well, who then had to drive me to Timaru to cash that in.
Yeah, it's a big drive.
Yeah, and ironically cost more in petrol than it would have had you just bought the cheeseburger.
Yeah, it's true. You could have bought it or made one locally.
Yeah.
But, and obviously they're not just tapping and throwing it to the biggest player and saying charge through. There's some real skill going into these calls.
Yeah.
The tap and goes. They're doing like it's almost like barbarians rugby. The old like ball up the back and everyone runs off like headless chickens and tries to see where it's going.
Interesting to see how it plays out, because I think the first couple of times, the first week when they did it, the Chiefs, it caught people off guard. And I think now more and more people are starting to do it, and I don't know that it's catching as many people off guard as it was, but do you think that'll eventually get shut down? Or do you think that's like a strategy that's here to stick around?
Yeah, I reckon maybe everyone will give it like a crack and then they'll see how it works. And if they score a try, they're like, let's do it again. But if they don't, they'll probably be like dragged over the coals as well for wasting a clear shot at goal or a clear kick to the corner. Yeah. And I think probably like the Northern Hemisphere international teams, you know, they're going to be kicking for the corner and going for the punishing rolling maul a la the England women's team in the Rugby World Cup final. But how did that go for you? Not well. We've got off track, I do have to say. And we've also sort of started quite late. I don't know if you've been watching the Super Rugby competition, but it's been going for a while. Unfortunately, this is the first time we've got together to do the pod. But so I guess positions have been established in the table over the last couple of weeks. We've had over the first week, which was, you know, just a real hiding for my team, the Highlanders. We might as well get right at them and and say, what team do you back? What team do you support?
Yeah, I'm from the Canterbury side of the divide between Canterbury and Otago. So I mentioned on the commentary the other night that my hometown Waimate, when the Crusaders played the Landers in the final, half the main street was red and black, half the main street was yellow and blue, and I was on the red and black side. And that enables me to support the Warriors because I know that regardless of how they go, the Crusaders are probably going to win another chip. Cantab, although you won't hear me being too vocal about it, it's kind of boring to support the Crusaders. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I just mean like no one wants to hear you vocally supporting the Crusaders.
Yeah, what is it? Are they going for 7 in a row?
Yeah, 8.
8 in a row this year.
Yeah.
I do like it though when I hear Crusaders fans say, oh, we're going for 8 in a row. They do conveniently forget about the Super Rugby Trans-Tasman, which they weren't even in the final for. The Highlanders and the Blues played for the final of that.
On a technicality, though, they won the same amount of games as the Blues did, but it was basically that season was who can beat up on the Waratahs by the most and who can run up the scoreboard. And, of course, the Blues did that.
Yeah, they really did.
And so there's a massive asterisk beside that. Do you count that as a proper Super Rugby title?
Well, I only don't because the Highlanders lost the final. If the Highlanders had won that final at Eden Park, it would have been right up there with the 2015 glory days. But
you're a Landers man?
Yeah, I am a Landers supporter. I did 4 years of university down there, and family sort of has a lot of connections down there. 4 generations of Lyall people lived in East Tyree, just out of Dunedin.
Oh, my God.
Then I moved up to Blenheim and lived up there for a while, so I love the mainland. Supported the Crusaders for the first few years when it was sort of by no choice of my own. It was the area I was in, so when I was old enough to be able to choose a team, not have one sort of just thrown upon me, I changed allegiances.
Went back to your whakapapa.
Yeah, very controversial as well. A lot of people don't really like the idea of changing allegiances, but to those people I say, get bent, I'll do what I want.
Yeah, well, and you're proud Strath-Tyree boys.
Yeah.
The Eels slip and slither.
Oh, mate. They've actually, this is really off topic, but they provided me with one of the greatest indignities on the rugby field ever. I once played for a club called University of Otago Rugby Football Club, played for the mighty Killer Bees in the Prem division. And, they have a mighty history, the Bees. They were always, thereabouts in the Prem 1 division, but not the year I played. The year I played, we were beaten by, 80 to 100 points every single week, and it was massively humiliating. There was a full write-up in the Otago Daily Times about how the Bees were awful and should get dropped down. You had John Leslie, who was the coach of the A's at the time, saying, this team needs to go down a grade. Like, there's real danger of these players getting physically hurt. And when I read that sentence, I happened to think he was talking about me.
Wow.
There was a huge sort of furore about it. And there's a playoff game at the end of the season. The bottom team from Prems and the top team from Prem 2, they battle it out. And it was Tyree who we were playing against. And we actually did a little bit of a dirty and brought down a few players from the A's to come and play. And that made the papers as well. They didn't like that on the ODT. They were not a fan of that at all. Wrote a big write-up about it. One of the players actually is Eli from 660, so these are big rugby names that were coming down to play for us. We were still thrashed, and I dislocated my knee in that game. Tyree went up to Prems, we went down, and I went to the hospital. So, it swings and roundabouts.
Oh, my God. That's humiliating.
Yeah, it really is. I've forgotten about that, so lovely to remember that humiliation on a Wednesday morning. But going back to the Super Rugby standings as they currently are, let's catch up after the Super Round, which I think we can all agree should never happen again, due to the fact that about 6 people went.
Yep. They thought they were going to a league game.
Yeah.
Those 6 people.
It really was dismal. You're watching, these lovely games being played between 2, of the heavy hitters of Super Rugby to, genuinely 1,000 people.
Yeah, they just couldn't care less about being there or not.
No.
It's a great idea, just poor execution. And why is it in Melbourne? Like, you put that in Auckland, put it in Christchurch.
Yeah.
That's going to be full.
Put it in a city where rugby union is probably the top 4 sports.
Yeah, exactly.
And you might get a better result. After that, and then we had the most recent round, round 3, which we'll talk in more detail now, has sort of left us with a table that looks like this. The Chiefs on top, undefeated after 3 games. And the Brumbies also undefeated after 3 games. So 2 undefeated teams streaking away in front, the Chiefs of which with 3 bonus points from their 3 games, really looking pretty good. Manaia, you and I commentated that game against the Highlanders on Friday night. And we'll start there today, I reckon, where they did have a bonus point win, and the Highlanders had, I guess, if you can have a bonus point loss, but not in a good way.
Yeah. I mean,
that's what they did.
The way you described that promotion relegation game where you dislocated your knee was kind of the vibe that I got from the Landers. And I actually thought that it wasn't as big a hiding as it could have been. I think the score in the end was 28-7. Forgive me if 28-7. And I honestly thought that the Chiefs, because they're capable of scoring points, I really thought that they were going to put up a bigger number than that. But when you finish a game with Aaron Smith playing at 10, because Mitch Hunt's gone down, their fullback, whose name escapes me at the moment, the Pom, he was away as well.
Yeah, Freddie Burns. So
it just looked bizarre, the optics of it, but a gutsy performance from your Landers, I thought.
Yeah, it was real tough, to be honest, to watch. As you mentioned, Aaron Smith playing at first five. That's quite out of position for the young man. Sort of premier halfback for the last, seems like 100 years, getting pushed out to first five because Mitch Hunt, is also a bit of a thereaboutsman, if you're going to be brutally honest, is too injured to carry on. Injuries across the whole field.
He tried to carry on, though, didn't he?
He gave it a go. He sort of, I don't know what happened to him. Did he dislocate his arm or something like this? He was carrying on out there. He was very, very hurt.
But they just didn't have anyone else to bring on.
No, they really did. And I'll tell you what, when I dislocated my knee, I wasn't thinking about standing up and going and playing again. I was like, how fast can I get off the field? I'm not here to try to be a hero, run around and save the day and get us back into Div 1. I was like, hey, someone carry me off instantly. Where's the laughing gas?
I've got a life to live.
Yeah, I really did. So, I mean, more power to him, to Mitch Hunt, for running around and making a few tackles. But I guess it's good to focus on the Chiefs for a little bit. 3 from 3, and they're looking pretty good. A couple of those players who aren't really All Blacks really are showing us how it's done.
Yeah, SS, Sean Stevenson. Presume that's a Holden reference that you were introducing on the commentary. Yeah. SS. He was the MVP of that game, and he might be the MVP of the league so far. Early doors, it's only 3 games. But every time he touches the ball, he looks like Will Jordan sort of last year. Every time he touches it, it's like, this guy might just run straight through you. And you couldn't really put your finger on exactly what it is. I don't know if he's that much faster than anyone else. I don't know if he's that much stronger than anyone else. But he's just very elusive, very evasive. And he's putting a real campaign together for the black jersey this year, isn't he?
Yeah, 100%. He has to be in the convo. I know he's been sort of flirting with it for a while, but I reckon that's a perfect analogy of that Will Jordan-ness last year where he could do no wrong. He's just so quick, always in the right space in the right time. Unfortunately, just seems to have a skull that's too thin for a human man. So just
Will Jordan,
suffering some real concussion symptoms by the sound of things. So hopefully he does get right. Wish you all the best, Will Jordan, because when he's on form, there's not really anyone like him apart from now Sean Stevenson.
And if he's not ready to go, because he's been gone for a long time now with those head knocks. I mean, hopefully this isn't the case, but if he's not still around come that time of the year, I mean, Sean Stevenson, I think, is going to be a shoo-in, wouldn't he be?
Yeah, it'd be a pretty good like-for-like swap out. I mean, and he's also like an out-and-out fullback, which you like to see as well, having someone out there.
And if Geordie's going to play at 12, then
We've got probably Bodie at 15. We're getting off topic here, but Bodie would be your 15, you have to think. And then I'd love to have Sean Stevenson on the bench just carving up some big, tired English bodies at the World Cup, just sprinting around, everyone diving in, doing a wee pukana as he does so, which I believe he did on the weekend when he scored one of his tries.
Well, one of the pukanas was before he scored the try. He did pukana before he crossed the line, and he went double finger guns on that try celebration. The second try score was a pukana as he was sliding along the ground. Single guns on that occasion. If Ardie Savea was given a week for potentially, gesturing a throat-slitting motion, what do 2 finger guns get you?
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing, and I think you're right. Sean Stevenson should have a week on the sidelines for persistent finger banging. It's sort of ungracious on a rugby field to be sliding around, pretending your hands are guns, shooting the crowd.
Well, kids look up to him.
He's a role model. These people are on the Weet-Bix packets that we feed to our children. You can't have them running around pretending their hands are guns. He's got to have a week off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a week per gun, which 2 for the first try, 1 for the next try.
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
It's only fair. We'll be writing into the judiciary and letting them know our feelings on the matter. Sean Stevenson, cool your jets because you got a few weeks off. And on that notion, let's go back a couple of weeks now. to Adi Xavier, doing, of course, the throat slit. You know, if we'd had a podcast that week, we probably would have talked about it. Yeah. But we might as well talk about it now because he's done the old point at a guy after he's been sent off. So, you know, the damage is done. But he's obviously still fuming. He looks back, he points at him, and then he gives him the big old-fashioned throat slit. Yeah. And for that, he was given a week on the sidelines. What's your take? You reckon you're into it fair enough?
Well, just compared to the things that he's actually employed to do at the Hurricanes, which is borderline maim other human beings, a gesture to me doesn't really warrant a week off. They could have done with him this week as well. We'll get to that shortly. But no, for me, it was also just kind of weird. It was kind of lame. It wasn't a cool like insult. I don't think that would have made SportsCenter. I don't particularly think that the guy that he did it to would have been that intimidated either. And when we talk about, like I said before, what he, like the image and the visual, and we say, oh yeah, but he's a role model for kids. He's also almost killing other humans out on the field. Like, I don't know, it's just a weird argument for me. Oh, he's a role model for the kids. Yeah,
I think the only thing that could be said is that, you know, if someone sees him doing a wee throat slit on the field in sort of Super Rugby field, I just sort of think the way that'll roll downhill is there'll be some sort of, you know, Div 2 game and, you know, the Central South Island, and someone will think, I'm going to do like Adi Xavier, but he's going to go get a tyre iron out of his car and beat up a guy in the car park. It's sort of, and he's like, oh, but Adi did it. You know, it's that thing where it sort of blows up out of the public eye and gets a bit more aggressive. Yeah. And, you know, if you are going to beat a guy with a tyre iron in a car park, you know, more power to you. Just don't do it to me.
Well, no. Also, I'd do it somewhere outside of the car park because if you're still in the car park, there's a chance he might be able to retaliate with his own tyre iron. Yeah. So really, really stack the deck in your favour. If you're going to take the tyre iron, take it out of the car park. That would be my advice in that scenario. In a game of under 85 rugby one time here in Auckland City, there was an on-field stoush between our team and another team, which shall remain nameless, mainly because I just can't remember what the name of the team was. Yeah. And we, you know, all happens on the field. And then during the handshake, there's a bit of argy-bargy as well. We went into the sheds, had a few beers, sung the team song, and we went to leave, and their entire team was waiting for us in the car park for to carry on. And we were not prepared to carry on. No one wanted to carry on. I didn't want to carry on. I wanted to go home. You've just been singing the team song.
So we all had to sprint to our cars as we were borderline assaulted, jump in the car and hoon off to Father Ted's where we could really let the celebrations continue.
That's also a power move while they're out there waiting for you. Blood red mad, and you were just in the sheds having a yarn, having a beer.
None the wiser either. Yeah. I want to point that out. We did not know they were out there. They were still in their kit. They must have thought, oh, this is carrying on in the car park. And then we went in, they were like, are these guys coming back?
You obviously won the game.
Yeah. Well, actually, again, can't remember. Really light on the details.
Oh, even more of a power move. If you're in the shed singing the team song, having just got towelled up and your opponent's waiting to beat the shit out of you in the car park.
And you're right, that is a dead right power move to lose a game and then go in the sheds. And it was at their ground as well, that much I do remember, and sing the team song on a loss. I've never heard of that. It's a good move. We should instill that into club rugby teams up and down the nation. Yeah. If you do have a humiliating loss, just go and let the team song fly.
Yeah, let it rip. We should even maybe put together a song for that very purpose.
Yeah, it's a great idea. We should put our heads together, get a team song together for the Champagne Rugby podcast so we can really let rip when things go our way or when things don't go our way.
Particularly when they don't. Because obviously some clubs, they take it very seriously. They don't want to besmirch the victory song by singing it when you've lost. But why don't we make a losers song?
It's not a bad idea.
A real win or lose, we're on the booze sort of thing.
Yeah, I love it. Well, going back to this Chiefs and Highlanders game, 28-7 was the final score. Chiefs, bonus point win. Highlanders just skating through. And I'd like to draw attention, we won't dwell on this humiliating loss for too long, but just one man, the big, bald number 8 at the back, Hugh Renton, who I think had an absolute standout of a game. There's other people like Ethan de Groot who also played well for the Highlanders in a beaten side. But Hugh Renton, what a guy, sort of just a real classic battler coming from the Highlanders who we've seen in years gone by, who's just putting his hand up, throwing himself into all the niggly work, getting the shit beaten out of him, just getting smashed, poking his finger in people's eyes, like God knows what he's doing there in the deep dark. Yeah, no,
and commentating that game, it was just shocking the amount of times his name came up. If you were playing a drinking game where you had to drink every time your player was mentioned in the commentary, Hugh Renton would have got you blackout by the end of the first half. He was into absolutely everything.
He really was, and I was wondering, because he's got a big bald head, right? I don't think he's necessarily that bald, but he's whipped it all off. And I was wondering, are we just saying his name a lot because there's a big skinhead out there running around?
I think that's definitely a part of it, because you'll notice anytime anyone's got a distinctive haircut, their name, because by virtue of the fact that it's easier as a commentator to pick him out of a lineup.
Yeah.
But no, that is definitely a part of it. But he was also just into everything, on offense and defense.
He was. I used to think that about wearing headgear. You know, when no one used to really wear headgear, but Josh Cromfeld did. So every time you saw headgear, you think it was him.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it'd be like Norm Maxwell doing something, and you're like, oh, Josh Cromfeld's in it. Oh, no, that's a different guy.
There was a guy in the NBA who grew a dreadlock, one single dreadlock that pointed out the front of his head. His name was Etwan Moore. And it was because his grandmother couldn't see him on the TV, so he grew this single dreadlock out the front of his head so she could see him. When he would jump to shoot, the dreadlock would dip in front of his eyes and obstruct his view of the rim.
Amazing.
Would it shock you to find out he is no longer in the NBA?
Yeah, it doesn't shock me too much. I once saw a guy who had one big dread, but he was homeless and he used it as a pillow.
I think I've seen that guy.
I think One Dread's his name, funnily enough. But we'll move on from the Chiefs game 28-7, unless there's anything else you'd like to add there, Manaia, for the mighty Chiefs. And we'll move on to Saturday's game. And you have to say, this is the game that everyone was the most juiced up about based on the result alone. This is the Fijian Drua against the Crusaders in Fiji. And, well, what a day. 25-24 to the Fijian Drua.
Yeah, and 21-19, I think it was, with about 10 minutes to go. And I was watching this one with G Lane over at the pub across the road. And he was just like, well, because he knows I'm a Crusaders fan, he was just like, you must be nervous now. I was like, nah, there's plenty of time on the board. Plenty of time for these are the kind of games that the Crusaders win. And they just about did. Sevu Reece made an astonishing break down the right-hand side. They eventually barged over for a try. But they left too much time on the clock. I was talking on the ACC's Mad Monday podcast, you can get that wherever you get your podcasts, that the Warriors' loss against the Roosters was a scheduling loss because it was 30 degrees. The Warriors had just had a preseason in hurricane cyclone conditions. Now they're playing in 30 degrees. Well, you send the Crusaders, who have just had a preseason in Canterbury, you send them over to play in 30 degree, 150% humidity over in Fiji. They looked dead. Also ignoring the fact that they rested players, which is quite disrespectful from the Crusaders. But yeah, they left too much time on the clock. The Drua kicked that conversion over and the place went nuts.
It went bananas. It's so good to watch on telly, like fans that actually give a shit. New Zealand fans just notorious for not really caring, being just chilled out, man.
Yeah.
Hey, it's all good, bro. Like the only place you get a real good rowdy crowd is usually down at the Highlanders in the zoo. But that's just because it's the students and they've had like 75 cans
They're not watching the game at all.
Super cheap beer. They're not too worried about what's going on. But they do add a real sort of oomph to the stadium if it is only one tiny end far away from the regular people. And literally, I don't know if you've been to the Sistema lunchbox down there in Dunedin, but it's completely unreachable from the main stand. Like they come in their own entrance, they go into their own stand. It's all fenced off. It's like Guantanamo Bay there. The regular people can't get anywhere near the students. Like we don't want to be anywhere near them. But it was that sort of vibe, but without the rampant alcohol abuse and just the pure love of the game. There was literally people swinging from trees.
Yes. There was a tree in the background that had all of the leaves just about shaken off. And that was the first thing we saw as well. It was absolutely incredible. And yeah, like you say, just the celebrations. And also the bank that you could see from the camera side looking out was just covered in people, all having a great time. Whenever they cut back to the other bank that was actually underneath, a grandstand sort of set up, it was almost a home game for the Crusaders.
Yeah.
They have played a fair few games of theirs over there in Fiji. It's a very Cantabrian thing to go to Fiji for a week for your holiday. So I thought that was quite good to see.
Also very Cantabrian thing to go to Fiji for a week and go watch the Crusaders. Most people be like, no, I'll just stay at the resort. But they're like, got to watch the boys.
Got to watch the Crusaders, Don't take part in any of the local cuisine. No. Just go to the Hard Rock Cafe. Don't assimilate in any way. Just take Christchurch with you over to Fiji. And that's exactly what they did.
I think you are dead right in the fact that heat and the atmosphere really got a hold of the Crusaders. Like Christchurch is not a Fiji-like place.
No.
And you mentioned as well, they rested a bunch of players, like all their ABs sort of kicked their heels up, thinking, it'll probably be a tough game, but we'll get there in the end. I think they underestimated them. They also underestimated the length of the grass. if you saw this field,
I
it was
just
a
going to bring
paddock.
this up. That was incredible. I don't know how they managed to get enough bloody spray paint on it to mark out the lines. It was almost like mid-shin. And that would slow down. It would benefit a player who is tall and athletic.
Yes.
Much like every player on the Fijian Drua side.
Every Fijian player, and probably a player who has grown up playing on ankle-high grass.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the players there.
Yeah.
I had to think, when I saw it, I thought, man, I wonder if that is intentional.
Yeah.
Keeping this grass nice and long, slow the ball down, slow everything down for the Crusaders, their ruck and mull game. They're basically like playing on a paddock out in Fairley or somewhere like this.
Yeah, no, absolutely it wasn't. It was like, I don't know, it's hard enough to track down their outside backs as it is, let alone the fact that they're a foot taller than you. You know, Severus is a pretty quick player, but he couldn't track down anyone because he had to peer over the top of the grass. It was like the plains of the Serengeti where he's got to look over the top to try and see his prey.
And can I just say, while we're talking of Severus, loving the addition of the sort of braided mullet that he's got right now. He's had the mullet for a while, just sort of free range and curly, but the braids really escalated to a new level.
Yeah, and another classic Cantabrian thing to do I know he's of Fijian heritage, but when you go over to Fiji to get one single braid with the beads in it, very, very Cantabrian to do.
Do you think he did that? Do you think he went to like the braider by the pool at the resort and was like, hey, can you braid my hair?
Yeah, and then what's going to happen is he's going to go back to school this week and he's going to look cool for like one day, but then one person, the mean girl, is going to take the piss out of him for having it, and then he's going to take it out in tears in the locker room, in the toilets at about lunchtime, and people are going to be like, didn't you just have your hair braided? He's like, no. I think that's how that's going to play out for.
It makes sense to me. And also, I bet he had to like wait in line with 6-year-old white girls while he was there to get his hair braided. He's like, oh, come on, what are you going to get?
Yeah.
You're going to get it full cornrows? I mean, so.
Oh, you're going Rasta? I was going to go Rasta. No, you do it. You do it.
Well, you look good. Anyway, that's what we're trying to say here, Severus. And another thing I'd like to talk about this game in particular, amazing to see hooker Quinton McDonald scoring 2 tries in this game after not playing Super Rugby for 7 years.
Is that right?
He played for the Crusaders way back when, then went and played for the Auckland Blues for a couple of seasons. Then he shot off overseas and played his rugby in France, all over the place for a whole bunch of random different teams. Came back home. I think he thought his days were over. Strapped on the boots of the Marcos as a late call-up. As a late call-up, fins up, go the boys, and played this year and has been called into the Crusaders as a sort of cover player, started the game, scored 2 tries in his first game back. You just love to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. His eyes would have lit up when he came back as well and got named in the starting team, because if you're a hooker, if you wear a jersey with number 2 on the back of it, your chance of scoring a try at the moment are through the roof.
It's insane. Like when we were kids, the idea of a hooker being the lead try scorer on a team is just outrageous, unless it was one of the big boys who would take those 5-metre taps.
Yeah, or a player that would go on to play wing in their later career, but just happened to play hooker in Primus.
Yeah, but the idea of everyone, you got Samisoni Takiaha scoring tries for fun.
Kurt Eklund was leading the league for the majority of last season.
Yeah, it's a whole new world of hookers scoring tries easily. And I've got a Quinton McDonald story that I'd like to share with you. He is a fellow Marlborough Boys College man. But he was about probably 3 or 4 years younger than me at school. And we're trialling for the first 15. I was in my 7th form year, and I think he might have been 4th form, which shows the discrepancy in our rugby ability. It was my first year trialling for the team. I think he'd played the year before in 3rd form. So, he was pretty handy. And it was the end of training, and God knows what our coach, Kieran Kane, who went on to coach the Tasman Marco Fins up, was thinking. But we're running some sort of drill, which was sort of just smash him. And you just have a few hit-ups, have a few phases, some ruck and maul, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Pass it one out and smash it up, just tackling it. It's real physical stuff. But the ball kind of got dead. So he's like, stop, and he just said, tap and go and run it up. And it was the end of a big training. Everyone was hurt, and no one really wanted to just tap a ball and sprint 5 metres and get smashed.
Up the guts.
But I knew, I was 7th form here. I hadn't played the year before. I thought, I've got to do all I can here to make this team. So I'll do it, put my hand up, took the tap, again, similar to the 5-metre out, took the tap, sprinted in, and Quinton McDonald's come in and devastated me. Like, absolutely hit right on the ball. And when you get tackled on the ball, it's kind of like an air bubble. So you bounce back. And I was smashed to the ground. And everyone was like, oh! And then he stopped it, Kieran Kane, the coach, because he stopped. He's like, oh, hold on, are we all right? I was like, yeah, I'm sweet as. Stood up. And then he goes, all right, we'll tap and go again. And then that someone tapped the ball and looked around and no one wanted to do it because it just seemed me be smashed. But I was, you know, when you get hit, your head's a little bit all over the place, you're not quite thinking straight. I was like, I'll go again. Took the ball, sprinted again. Quinton again has come storming in to tackle me, but this time he's gone slightly over the ball and his shoulders made full contact with my throat. And I've crumpled, like, it genuinely saw my life flash before my eyes. Like, I've been smashed on the rugby field. I'm not good at rugby, but I often get hit hard. And this was one of the worst I've ever been. 2 in a row from Quinton McDonald, and it was so bad that as we stood up, Kieran Kane, the coach, called training over, said, that's enough, boys. All right, I've seen enough here. Stood up, and we all sort of walked, without really speaking, back over to where the bags were. And another character there, by a man by the name Rain Vulavula, he went on to play for the Red Devils as well. He was probably full form as well. There's a 14-year-old boy. I'm nearly 18 at this stage. As we're walking off, he just puts his hand on my shoulder and was like, it's all good, brother. And I knew at that moment when I was being comforted by a 14-year-old that maybe my first 15 dreams weren't going to come true.
So you didn't make the team?
No, I didn't make the cut. But I went on to have a great, successful career captaining the second 15. So that's the main thing. And
you didn't even get the cool, raspy voice like Darren Lockyer from having your larynx collapsed.
Genuinely, for about a day and a half, I did. I was like, oh no, because I was in the choir, so this is tough stuff. But Quinton McDonald, it's good to see you out there ripping and tearing. If only they'd been able to score one more point. And I was watching the game actually at the cricket. I was working at the cricket, the Test cricket, had it on the phone. And if the boss is listening from New Zealand Cricket, I didn't have it on the phone. And it was during a appeal process for a wicket.
Yeah.
So there was an appeal process going on. I was watching the game, and then I saw the penalty get given. And I don't know what your experience from the penalty was, but did you instantly think the game was done?
Yeah, I did.
What was the penalty for?
I could not tell you.
Yeah, I was, because I was on the phone, there was so much going on, I was looking down, I could have watched the replay.
Yeah.
But sort of like one of those niggly penalties where there's a lot of people in there, and the ref just says, let's whip up there.
Yeah, well, I mean, they thought, the Fijian Drua as well, they were so convinced that was going to go over, they were celebrating before they even placed the tee down.
Yeah, you've got to celebrate though, right? You've got to think, you've got to back your kicker.
I wouldn't, if I'm the kicker, I don't want people celebrating before I've kicked that. And he didn't look like he wanted to either. He was he had very steely focus on making sure that this one went over, because that's so much pressure, because the kick should go over.
Yeah.
It's the kind of one that you shank, particularly on grass as long as they were dealing with.
Well, it was long grass. You could almost just like make a little mountain with the grass to use to kick.
Just about didn't need a tee, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see, I've never seen it in Super. I'd love to see the old school, you use your kicking foot boot. Yeah. Take one boot off, put the ball in there, and then just whack it with a bare foot. Yeah,
or like jam your heel into the ground to make a mound of dirt and then prop the ball up on that.
Does anyone use sand? I know they used to use sand back in the day in the NRL.
In the NRL, yeah.
But you don't see it in Super Rugby. These fancy boys with their tees.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we bring back the sand bucket. I just imagine that's a horrible amount of admin.
Yeah.
Having to carry a sand bucket around. Tees are quite good these days.
Yeah, tees are pretty handy. But he did nail it, and everyone went absolutely apeshit. The whole of Fiji sort of turned into what I can only imagine was just a booze-soaked party club for the next 24 hours.
I'd like to think so. Gutting for the Crusaders as well, because you go over to Fiji for a trip, for a weekend. You'd really want to win, wouldn't you?
I think everyone goes over there thinking in the back of their minds, we're probably going to have a win here.
Yeah, and then celebrate with that winning feeling. Or I guess in your instance, like the 2 team, was it the under 85s team? That you celebrated a loss like a victory anyway. Maybe, hopefully they took that on board.
Well, I actually saw the Crusaders afterwards, and they kind of were, I guess they maybe were caught up in the moment as well of, this has been a really great thing for Fiji and the Fijian Drua for them and rugby here. They kind of realised the significance of it and were happy with the loss.
Yeah.
They were almost happy with it to a point where I was like, come on, boys, take it easy. You're the defending champs and you've just lost in Fiji playing a B team that you thought was going to walk over here and have a bit of a cakewalk.
Yeah.
Don't be too happy about it. Like we were singing the team song because we were an under 85 kg team who just basically got on the piss and that was about it. These guys are a professional rugby outfit. They should be doing better than this.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they sit 8th on the table now. I think everybody was happy for the Drua to win that game. I think everybody low-key wanted them to win that as well, just for the absolute sense, and we got it. But 8th on the table now, the Crusaders. Is it panic stations for them, do you reckon?
I think there's probably some hard conversations going on down there at Crusaders HQ saying, guys, we probably have to pull finger here. We can't have another we can't have another week where we splutter.
Yeah.
And we'll get into this in a little bit, but big week for them this week as well, coming up to Auckland, of course, playing the Blues in a pretty, you wouldn't say must win this early in the season, but certainly mustn't lose.
Yeah, it's very much it's one of those games that you want to put a stake in your claim to the title this year.
Yeah.
Because I know the Blues will be fired up about it because they haven't won one since the early 2000s.
Well, speaking of the Blues, let's move on from that great game in Fiji and we'll move down to Wellington Sky Stadium, the ugliest stadium that exists, apart from probably Orange Theory Stadium in Canterbury, to be honest. That is a real ugly stadium.
Oh, it's a shitter.
Yeah, real poozy looking place. Very really full as well. But let's stop ripping on Canterbury and talk about the Hurricanes versus the Blues at Sky Stadium. And this was billed as a bit of like the game of the round, early doors. Everyone thought this is going to be really what set the competition alight. In my opinion, didn't really prove to be that. The Blues kind of comprehensively won, if even only by 6 points. 19-25 was the final score.
Yeah.
But looking fairly comfortable in the end there.
Yeah, they never really looked too challenged, did the Blues. I don't think they'd be too happy with their performance, particularly going into, I mean, obviously they've taken the win away, but going into taking on the Crusaders, who also, admittedly, as we just mentioned, lost. I don't know that they would have taken a whole lot of confidence away from this, but as you mentioned, the Canes never really looked like they were going to win this game, and their crowd never really looked like they thought they were going to win it either. A dismal turnout, and the people that did show up didn't really seem to give a shit.
Yeah, it's been documented many times before, but it just has to be said. Yellow seats in the stadium really point out the glaring, obvious fact that no one's come to watch when no one does come to watch, because you can just see so easily.
Yeah, Forsyth Bar Stadium were really onto it when they had their hodgepodge of various different greys, blacks and whites. So you could have three people sitting in there and it looks like 30,000.
Looks bloody good.
Because you can't tell who's who. I thought it was very telling when they would go to the drone shot over the top of the cake tin. There's the broken down ferry in the background. There was an empty train lot with rusted out carriages, and it just sort of told the tale of where the Hurricanes are at the moment. No, TJ, he's in a suit this season, despite still gunning for that number 9 jersey for the World Cup. Artie Savea, as we just talked about, made a questionable gesture, and he's been given a week on the sidelines.
The old threatened murder.
Yeah, the old murder threat, and look who hasn't. But he was standing in a real weird... Did you see when they kept cutting to him?
No.
And he was standing in like a corridor, it looked like. I presumed he had walked outside from a corporate box, but every time they cut to him, the angle made it look like he was just standing in like a service lift or something, and he was just watching it. He did not look happy, Artie Savea. And they're a team, more, I think, than any other team, that depend heavily on their superstars. They depend on TJ, they depend on Artie, they depend on Geordie, and those players have been playing brilliantly, or did play brilliantly last season. But that's about all they've got. The one other one, we talked about Hugh Renton and how he was into everything. Peter Lakai looked tremendous as well out there.
He looked absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
And he's one of those players that you kind of think he has to be in the conversation for higher on. It's like he's just carving it up. But, these All Black selectors do seem to like a select few and don't like to go too far outside the realms. But you have to think he has to be knocking on that door, at least for some sort of consideration.
Well, is part of it the same Hugh Renton effect, whereby he's got quite a distinctive, almost fledgling Sideshow Bob haircut that he's running with the head tape as well, that he's very easy to spot out on the field?
It could be the exact same thing, where a big bit of head tape really does make you sort of beacon.
The Sideshow Bob effect.
Yeah, the Sideshow Bob, which makes you think other players out there should really start, if you're thinking, how can I crack this All Blacks team? And even all the way down to, schoolboy rugby. If you're like me in your 7th form and you're trying to crack the first 15, just do something bodacious with your hair and see if it works.
Well, yeah, I mean... Would Matt Todd have got more starts for the All Blacks had he run a Sideshow Bob, perhaps?
It simply couldn't have hurt for a player of his calibre to get the minutes he got. If I was him, I would have shaved the whole thing off and spray painted my head blue.
Well, it would have been an aggressive... I mean, there was a player in the first 15 when I was at high school who went bald in about 6th form, and I think that really got him a few extra caps.
Yeah.
Because you looked at it and it's just like, does this bloke have 2 kids on the sideline? He's playing for the first 15. It's out of control.
Fellow Marlborough Boys College alumni, but way older than me, Anton Oliver. He, I don't know if your high school or if other high schools are like this. We had obviously all the first 15 pictures from the years gone by displayed in the hallways of the school. And if you checked down to Anton Oliver's years, he played from third form all the way to seventh form if you're young. God only knows what that is, year 13 to year 9, I think.
Yep.
He played the whole way through high school. He was captain in his fourth form year to show how good he was. But you see the pictures, and even when he's third form, you're like, oh, there's a massive kid in the back row there. You're like, oh, that's a 13-year-old. And from about fifth form to seventh form, it genuinely looks like there's someone's dad sat in the middle of the front row because he is just so much more developed. Both like the testosterone going through his body must be outrageous. His knuckles are like, there's like him, and the kid next to him looks like some dweeb from the TV show Recess, and he's sitting there just absolute Randall's beside him, hairy knuckled, hairy arm, full 5 o'clock shadow, receding hairline, and he's 16 years old. You think it's hardly fair that this man is playing rugby for the rest of him. I guess that's why he got to be All Black captain, because he was so far developed.
Old hatchet head. Back to the Canes game. Yes. I thought there was a couple of interesting decisions, and like I said, they depend so heavily on just a handful of players. Geordie Barrett being one of those. Now he was playing. He had the 12 jersey on his back, but he was essentially the first 5 for the Hurricanes. He was first receiver 9 times out of 10, but he also had to play like a battering ram because he did have the 12 on his back. Whenever they needed something, it would be him taking the go forward, and it looked like when Roger Tuivasa-Sheck in his last season for the Warriors, where it was like, I'm head and shoulders above everyone else here. I'm in the conversation for one of the best players globally. I need to get involved in every single thing. And it was just a little, I don't know, it was almost depressing. I'm not a Canes fan in any way, but I got the RTS PTSD from watching that.
Yeah, the RTS PTSD is a perfect way to say that. I was thinking the exact same thing, and it really does throw you back to little kid footy when you had the best player on the team who you chuck the ball every time he got it.
Yeah.
He's been that for a couple of years now for the Canes, since his brother kind of up and left him and abandoned him for the Blues.
Doesn't get enough hate for that, I don't think.
Not enough hate. It's because, in my opinion, he presents as a classic Aucklander. And so you instantly forget that he's a Wellingtonian, because he does fit in so easily to the Auckland mould. And I say that in the terms of, your Carlos Spencers, your Tudor watch ambassador, golf playing Aucklander. He sort of fits that so perfectly that you forget that he's not from anywhere else. You go, of course he plays for the Blues. But he's actually left his brother high and dry down there. And Geordie's had to fill every gap in that team. And just to his own detriment. And I wonder if it will come back to bite him in the arse, because when he goes to a team that is a little bit more equipped and has a few more players who he doesn't have to do everything, what it will be like for him to sink back into that role and just have to do his core duty.
I think it'll be freeing. Just one other thing on this game for me was that Beauden Barrett had the kicking duties unceremoniously yanked from him very early doors. I think he had one kick. One kick, he shanked it. The next kick was from about 20 metres back, bang in front of the goal, and they were like, Perifetta, can you...
Yeah, Stevie, come in.
Do you want to come and grab this one? Because we just don't trust Beauden Barrett. What was that about?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's been a bit like that for Beauden Barrett. I don't know if you follow him on Instagram, but he's often kicking, always kicking in his warm-ups. Never kicking in the games. I want to see him kicking the goals.
Well, I mean, after that first one, particularly when he's playing against the Crusaders this coming week, I'd love to see him kicking a few goals.
Yeah, you'd love to see him
sliding them out wide,
spraying it everywhere. Another good thing to see from the Hurricanes is, of course, Captain Hurricane coming out at the start of the game. And sort of big aeroplane. And I don't think we see that enough from the current Super Rugby teams as a dedication to their mascot.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's one of the more prominent ones. I can't even remember. I mean, the Crusaders, they still have the horsemen, but they've put the swords down.
Yeah, probably for good reason there.
Probably for good reason. I remember Shaq the Cat down in Otago, but I think that might have been an NPC thing.
Yeah, I believe it was. And they also had, just the Highlander man, and he was sort of a ripped man, but he may have had some anti-vax views, so I think they parted ways with him.
He's been cancelled.
Yeah.
I also am not a fan of any... mascot that's just a guy.
Yeah.
Even if, be he in a kilt or otherwise, if it's just a bloke, I need some sort of dress up.
The only variation on that theme is, I believe it was FMG Stadium Waikato, when there was that guy in the cherry picker who just had a chainsaw.
Yes.
I can get behind him all day long.
Yeah.
He's just waving a chainsaw around in a Waikato jersey. Like, what more could you possibly ask for in terms of G'ing a team up?
I'll tell you what, his name escapes me, but someone will be screaming at their iPod right now, but the guy who was the mascot for the Steelers, Steely Dan was his name, I've heard some horrific stories of Steely Dan taking the helmet off and having a chunder into it at halftime. Stephen Donald told me a story that he once got chased around with raw chickens by Steely Dan after a particularly tense contract negotiation between Steely Dan and the county's Manukau board.
Amazing.
He decided to show up with raw chickens and chase children.
That's startling stuff. I don't know what sort of message that is sending, but I mean, it is striking fear into the hearts of your enemies, which is a mascot is supposed to do.
Mascot's role. Do we need more mascot involvement in Super Rugby?
Well, the Auckland one, and I don't know if this is for the Blues or for the NPC team or for both, but there was a big potato who wore the blue and white hoops and walked around. I think he was sort of a sponsor's forced mascot.
Right,
but
a potato, perhaps.
Massive potato from far away. It just looks like a huge shit. And there was some sort of mascot strolling around, being a big old dump. I know they had the harbour master here in Auckland for a while, who was the mascot, but never quite had the same sort of effect as a full-on, what do you call him, Captain Hurricane.
Or a man with silver spray paint on his face chasing children with a raw chicken.
Yeah, here's a fun fact for you. The Breakers, I don't think he'd say mascot, but he was the hype man.
Yes, Cheeky the Kia?
No, well, Cheeky the Kia, he was in the Cheeky the Kia outfit, I think for 5 years. Could be longer. And now he's the hype man, so was in the Kia outfit. I think he won the great mascot race where they got all the mascots from all the franchises and let them sprint up. He is now the general manager of the Breakers.
The GMC, they're calling him.
The GMC. He's still on the microphone, still hyping up the crowd, and he also signs their paychecks.
And, by the way, just last season was named GM of the Year in the Aussie NBL as well.
It's incredible stuff. And you have to think maybe that's just like a passion thing, right?
It's the richest story.
Maybe if Steely Dan started coaching the Blues.
Perhaps that's what his pay dispute was about.
Yeah. Steely Dan had enough.
Yeah. And he must be livid watching Cheeky the Kia GMing the Breakers in the grand final now.
Oh, it's amazing stuff. So there we go. Hurricanes and the Blues. Really a bit of a flop in the end of that game.
Yeah.
In my humble viewing experience, I sort of vaguely lost interest and passed out in the hotel room under the weight of the minibar, which I guess takes us to this current round. Manaia, if you'd be so kind as to delight us with your thoughts, your feelings, what you see happening, any predictions, or any other thing you'd like to add vaguely for that matter.
So obviously the game of the round is Saturday, 7:05 p.m. in Auckland. It's Blues versus Crusaders. That's a real top of the table clash, despite the fact the Crusaders are actually at the bottom of the table. It's a real statement of intent for the Blues if they're to win this one. It's a real bounce back for the Crusaders if they are as well. So that one's the obvious one. But for me, and I suspect maybe even for you as well, the Landers are taking on the Force Sunday 3:35. Now we were talking about scheduling losses before. About the Crusaders having to go play in Fiji, about the Warriors having to go play at a scorching Sydney. They're playing in Invercargill.
Yes.
So the Western Force, on top of a 5-hour time difference that they're going to have to contend with, on top of, I believe it's a 5-hour cross-country flight from Perth to Sydney, then another 3-hour flight from Sydney to Christchurch. God knows how they're getting from Christchurch to Invercargill. They're then going to have to play in front of Southlanders as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in that flight from Perth to Southland, you go back about 35 years in terms of the culture. You go down to beautiful rural Southland, which I'm a huge fan of, and get down there, and I'm sure those fans are going to come out in force and absolutely tear in for those Western Force players. And a good old-fashioned afternoon game on a Sunday. The Spates will be flowing from probably the night before for some of those Southlanders, you'd imagine, really ripping into it.
There'll be some players for the Western Force who haven't seen a man with a dreadlocked mullet and Spates bottle caps folded into that mullet. And I think that kind of culture shock, coupled with the time difference, as you say, of 35 years, it's going to be almost a 16th man out on the field for the Highlanders.
Yeah, you'd have to say. And I think, and I'm going to say we here, I think it's our chance for the first W of the season, a surprised Force team who, have actually been playing some good footy, beating Moana Pacifica last weekend, for instance, the week before that in Super Round. I mean, God knows, I didn't watch the game, but they were pumped by the Reds. So let's go back to present time. I think that's going to be certainly a good way to spend a Sunday afternoon. I just love a Sunday afternoon game.
Same.
Get out there with the family.
Yeah.
Just get into it, rip a few lids off some cans, enjoy the experience, eat some hot chips that aren't quite hot enough with some tomato sauce on top.
It's all over your fingers.
It's all down your digits, up your knuckles. You've got to lick them very seductively on the side.
Hot dog's still frozen at its core.
Oh, that's a good question, him and I. When you go to a game to order food, do you have a go-to food order that you get?
Fritz's Wiener.
Fritz's Wiener.
Every single time. Sometimes I'm feeling exorbitant. I'll splash out on a double wiener. And I'll just play it by ear, what I'm feeling on the day, whether I go spicy, do I go the English mustard, do I go that grainy mustard? Often I will avoid the grainy mustard, but I'm a Fritz's Wiener man. If I show up to any sporting ground anywhere and Fritz is there turning his wieners, I'm in.
And when you go the double Fritz Wiener, controversially, do you eat the first wiener just sausage only, and then eat the bun and the sausage, or do you combine them into a double dog?
Yeah, combine them double dog. Because it's a bread to sausage ratio that you're looking for. So if you're just going to raw dog that one dog straight down your gob, I just goes against the spirit of the wiener for me.
Yeah, the spirit of the wiener is what we need to think about. And I agree. I saw a man, I say this because I saw a man at the Test cricket against Sri Lanka on the weekend, just raw dogging the first one. And I want to take a photo of him because it was horrific stuff, but it's hard to take a photo of a man raw dogging a sausage without looking like a bit of a predator.
Yeah, well, he was looking like a predator as well. But it was also, like I said, it just goes against the spirit of the wiener. The whole point of getting the double dog. Like, otherwise, why not just grab one extra sausage? You know what I mean? I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Other games this round, of course, on Friday night, we've got the Hurricanes versus the Waratahs, and that is back at Sky Stadium, where, as you mentioned, there will be a unusable ferry just floating in the Wellington Harbour, just bobbing around, bunting into one side, still charging their passengers full price, mind you.
Yep. And extra for the Wi-Fi.
And extra for the what? We see you, Inter Islander, but we will accept your sponsorship if you want to sponsor, and we'll go very nicely on you. Who do you see winning that? That is, of course, the Hurricanes versus the Waratahs. Both Hurricanes sitting on 2 wins and a loss. Waratahs only 1 win so far, but a real middle of the table shit fight there.
No, and they lost to the Melbourne Shambles last week as well. So I would, Artie Sarver back in the fold, I think that the Canes will win that one.
Yeah, I'd like to see the Canes win that one at home as well. If they don't, I think it's probably very early days to be saying this, but I'd say that's all she wrote for the Hurricanes at this stage.
Relegate them.
Relegate them. Get them out of here, the Dogs. And speaking of the Melbourne Shambles, they, of course, play the Chiefs on Saturday afternoon game in Waikato. Rebels coming off a pretty decent win, you have to say. I was surprised. My picks were a waking nightmare last week, all over the show. Supported the Highlanders, they lost. Supported the Crusaders, they lost. Supported the Waratahs, they lost. So not good stuff, but you have to say the Chiefs are looking bloody good at the top of the table, and the Rebels, I reckon, are going to get pumped.
No, I think 4 from 4 for the Chiefs, 4 bonus points as well. And not only that, but as I look at the table now, their points differential is at a frightening 65. I expect them to bump that up a fair bit. I reckon they're going to be uncatchable in terms of points differential.
And while you are looking at points differential, glance your eyes down to the Highlanders, who I believe is at 98 negative currently, which it's not good. It's not good. On the Chiefs, really quickly, Brad Weber, how good is he?
He's just tremendous. You talk about players in like a contract year or in players that need to stand up because something's on the line. This year, there's so much competition for that number 9 jersey. And I got to say, Brad Weber has put himself, I'd say, almost head and shoulders above the rest so far this year.
And this is a guy who last year was basically just given the short arm, don't argue from the All Blacks. He wasn't really in consideration. I don't even know if he went away.
No.
He just hung out and was like, all right, well, I'll work on my game, as they took away 3 other halfbacks who were preferred against him. And Finlay Christie's still playing really well for the Blues.
He is, and Aaron Smith is still Aaron Smith.
Yeah.
But, Whakatava, an injury, TJ Pedonato's in street clothes commentating the games at the moment. So the door's very much open. It's like you say, when they said, you're not going to be in the squad, and he's sort of turned around this season and gone, but what if I'm way better than everyone else?
Yeah, I reckon he's headed back to the dojo, put on some aggressive D&B into his headphones and just ripped the shit out of some Thai bow to get back in shape. And he is in great shape. And we love you, Brad Weber, and we love what you're doing out there And we'll finish up on, as you mentioned, the game of the round has to be said. And that's basically because two Kiwi teams are playing it. And a real rivalry, the Blues versus the Crusaders, 7:05 p.m. at Eden Park. And I'm picking it. I'm going to say that the Crusaders are going to squeak in there and knock the Blues off at home.
Yeah, I think they will. I think they're going to have a few players back. They're going to have a few All Blacks back in the fold. They won't have just been at the swim-up bar for 4 days. It will not be 40-odd degrees and 150% humidity, although it will be pretty humid, one would imagine. And they'll have they've got a lot on the line this week, the Crusaders. This is kind of the last dance for Scott Robertson. If he is still planning on being the next All Black coach, he needs to get a few more wins on the board this season because we are a very what have you done for me lately rugby public.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned it before with Brad Weber and sort of a contract year or scenario. Yeah. You want to be performing. And if this is the year that Scott Robertson takes a dump in the bed and the Crusaders don't perform, it's a pretty bad showing unless he says, actually, I checked out. I was doing all this All Black stuff.
Yeah.
I was doing all these cool, drawings for moves we could do for the ABs, and that's why the Crusaders... And then I go, it does make sense.
Yeah, well, as a responsible yet degenerate gambler, you can't bet against a team that's more desperate to win. So, for example, the Breakers final series that's going on, when they won that last game, they had more riding on it. If they lost, they were eliminated. So you just can't match or replicate or fake that kind of desperation. Yeah. And I feel like the Crusaders have that this weekend.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I've been wrong before once or twice, probably maybe 3 times. But I do think the Crusaders will come up here and whip in there. Richie Mo'unga will be back, Sam Wylock will be back, all the heavy hitters who were missing last week. So you'd have to think that maybe the Blues, who have been close to full strength, but they're also looking good. You got the guys like Hoskins Tutu playing his bloody pants off. That guy can run around with a ball in hand, can't he?
The amount of All Blacks that they've got in there is ridiculous. They've almost got an entire All Black front row on the bench. Kurt Eklund's coming off the bench for them. Their loose forward trio are all Blacks.
Yeah.
Their backline is almost like an all-star backline.
It's outrageous. I feel like we need to do some sort of a bit of a shuffle around of the cards and chuck some All Blacks down the Highlanders, why don't we? Surely it's going to be better for them than sitting on the bench all week at the Blues, holding the pads and then getting 20 off the bench. It's actually going down and starting and making a good fist of it somewhere else.
Send Roger down there.
Bit of a transfer market, I think, would be good to see in the Super Rugby. I think they've tried it before and it was a massive failure. But I wouldn't mind seeing it again. And are you commentating any games for the ACC this week, Manaia?
I am, but I couldn't tell you what they are off the top of my head. I know that we are commentating all of the Kiwi games, so just check us out on the ACC on Instagram and see who's commentating what game where. I know that Matt Ward's in for an absolute hiding this weekend, as well as Mike Lane and myself. I'm on at least one of the commentaries, so yeah, we've got you covered. Yeah,
I think Matt Heath's involved as well, and all those available on iHeartRadio and Sky Sport 9, I want to say. Could be wrong on that. I mean, you do the maths. You're all beautiful people out there. But that is us for the first episode of Champagne Rugby Podcast. We thank you very much for joining us from the Export Beer Garden studio. Big shout out to Manaia Stewart, our beautiful guest today. And any parting words you'd like to pass on to the rugby bloody loving public?
No, but I'd just like to thank you for an in-person shout out. I don't know that I've ever had a shout out from another person when they're the only other person in the room. So I greatly appreciate that and greatly appreciate anyone listening today.
All right, go well out there. You're all beautiful.